Okay, so this happened in the summer of 2019. I found a roommate on Craigslist. I know how that sounds, but I needed somewhere cheap, and I needed it fast. My lease had ended, my job had cut my hours, and I had maybe 2 weeks to find something I could actually afford. The Craigslist ad was for a furnished room in a 2-bedroom apartment in Queens. Utilities included, month to month, no credit check. The rent was low enough that I emailed right away. The guy who answered called himself Matt. We conversed and met for coffee at the apartment. The apartment was clean, the neighborhood was decent. No obvious signs that anything was wrong. He said he worked odd hours doing freelance delivery and mostly kept to himself. He asked if I had a steady income, whether I brought people over a lot, and whether I smoked. Just normal roommate questions. I moved in 3 days later. For the first week, he seemed fine. Not warm exactly, but easy enough to live with. He cleaned up after himself. He never played music loudly and had a habit of being in the kitchen whenever I came home, which I noticed but didn't think much about. The first thing that felt slightly off was how quickly he started asking practical questions. Not big personal questions, not where I grew up or if I was seeing anyone, just little things that seemed harmless on their own. Questions like what time I usually left for work, whether my manager was strict about lateness, if I got paid by direct deposit or paper check, if my bedroom door locked, or if it was one of those old doors you could push open if the latch didn't catch right. He asked them casually, like they had come up naturally. At the time, I didn't hear them the way I hear them now. I answered most of them without thinking, because they sounded like the kind of dumb apartment conversation people have when they're sharing a place. You complain about work, you mention your bank app is down, you say something about the super never fixing the lock on the front door. It didn't feel like giving information. It felt like filling silence. About 2 weeks in, I came home and found my bedroom door almost closed instead of fully closed. It was open, but not open enough that it would have caught my eye immediately. It was just slightly wrong. I stood there for a second looking at it. I knew how I left it. If I didn't push it completely shut, the air from the window would move it. That's why I always made sure to shut it completely. I opened the door and looked around. Nothing seemed obviously touched. My laptop was where I'd left it. The cash I had in a ceramic bowl on the dresser was still there. The closet door was shut. The bed was unmade in the same way I had left it. Then I noticed the top drawer of my dresser wasn't fully pushed in. Again, not dramatic, just off by maybe half an inch. I opened it. My t-shirts, socks, charger, and passport seemed intact. But who could have come in here? That was the first time I asked Matt if he'd been in my room. He didn't get defensive. He just looked at me, genuinely puzzled, and said, "No, why would I be in your room?" I told him the door looked different and my drawer was slightly open. He shrugged and said, "It's an old building," and he argued that the drawers in the apartment had bad hinges. That made enough sense that I let it go, but only halfway. I started taking pictures of how I left things before I went to work. Not every day, just now and then when I remembered. 3 days later, I came home early because my shift had been cut short. I unlocked the front door and immediately heard my bedroom door close. Not slam, close. I stood there in the entryway holding my bag and listening. Then Matt came out of the kitchen holding a beer and said, "You're home early." He sounded so normal that for a second, I almost doubted what I'd heard. I asked if he'd been in my room. He smiled a little, not amused exactly. More like I was embarrassing both of us by asking. "No," he said. "I've been in here." I looked past him at the kitchen counter. There was no food out. No laptop, no sign he had been doing anything in there at all. I went into my room and checked the photos I had taken that morning against what I was seeing. The photos showed my backpack hanging from the desk chair facing inward. Now it was hanging outward. The ceramic bowl on the dresser had been turned slightly. My closet door was open a little when I knew I had shut it. That was enough for me to start paying attention properly. After that, I stopped answering his questions directly. If he asked what time I'd be home, I said, not sure. If he asked whether I got paid Friday or Monday, I said it varied. He kept asking things, but by then, I understood the point of them. He wasn't making conversation. He was learning my routine. 4 days after, I got a fraud alert from my bank app about an attempted login from a device I didn't recognize. Nothing got in, fortunately. I changed my password, told myself it was probably unrelated, and went to bed trying not to let all of it connect in my head. I started making plans to move out after that day, but I didn't say anything to him because by then I knew enough not to. I told a friend from work what had been going on and asked if I could stay on his couch for a few nights once I got my stuff out. He said yes. What changed it from bad roommate situation to something else was what I found the night before I left. Matt had gone out around 10. I heard him lock the front door behind him. I had already decided I was done, and I wanted to make sure I wasn't being paranoid before I started accusing somebody in my own head of things I couldn't prove. His room was usually shut. He'd never invited me in once. I opened it. Most of it looked normal. Unmade bed, clothes on a chair, cheap desk, delivery bags in the corner. Then I saw a legal pad on the desk. At the top of one page was my name, and under it was a list. My work schedule, as best he could guess it. The days he thought I got paid. A note about my manager's name because he had overheard me say it once on the phone. Parents in Ohio. No girlfriend. Keeps passport in dresser. Cash maybe in room. Laptop old but worth something. And under that, a second list with times beside them. Left home at 8:12 a.m. Home at 6:43 p.m. Shower at 11:18 p.m. Things like that. Small records of my life being watched from the other side of an apartment wall. There were other pages underneath, other names, but I did not stay to read them. I took pictures, grabbed my backpack, passport, laptop, and cash, and left. I went straight to the police station near my friend's place and showed them the photos. I don't know exactly what I expected them to do, but I knew I wasn't going back into that apartment alone. 2 officers came with me the next afternoon, while I got the rest of my things. Matt wasn't there. One of them walked through the apartment, looked at the photos again, and asked if I had rented the room directly from him. I said yes, through Craigslist. He asked if I had ever seen a lease. I said no. Turns out the apartment wasn't his. He was subletting one room illegally and using the second room the way other people use a locked filing cabinet. Building management told the officers they'd had complaints about short-term tenants cycling through that unit for over a year, but nobody had ever filed anything detailed enough for them to act on it. I never heard whether they charged him with anything serious. I know the landlord got him out eventually. I know the bank fraud attempt stopped. I know I changed every password I had and still kept waking up for a while, convinced someone was in my room. What got to me wasn't that he had gone through my things. It was how patient he had been about it. How ordinary he made it all sound while he was learning the shape of my life. That's the part Craigslist leaves out. It's not always that the room is fake. Sometimes the room is real. It's the person already living there you should be worried about. If you're enjoying these stories, you can subscribe. There are more like this every week. I was 27 when this happened. I had just gotten separated from my wife at the time, and I needed a change of apartment. A guy I knew a little from college posted that his old roommate from years back named Ryan needed someone to take a spare room. I barely knew him, but it still felt more trustworthy than answering random listings. I needed somewhere affordable pretty quickly, so I took a look at the place, met Ryan once, and said yes. For the first few weeks, everything was fine. Ryan was quiet, kept normal hours, and didn't intrude on my space. He had a few friends who came over occasionally. Normal people, nothing that made me uncomfortable. I told myself I'd gotten lucky. Around the 3rd week, he invited me into his room to help move some appliances out for repair. Then I noticed that he had no photographs anywhere in the room and the apartment in general. Not one. No family, no travel pictures, nothing personal on any surface. Most people have at least something. A picture on a phone case, a postcard on the fridge. Ryan's side of the apartment looked like a hotel room. I told myself some people were just private and let it go. About 6 weeks in, I was looking for a pen in the kitchen drawer and found a prepaid phone, a burner, but it was still in the packaging and hadn't been opened. I put it back and didn't mention it. People have reasons for prepaid phones, I said to myself. It could be for privacy, a second number for work, whatever. I dismissed it and moved on. The thing that actually started pulling at me was when I signed for a package at the door one afternoon. I noticed the name on it. The name had Ryan on it, but the last name wasn't Ryan's last name, which I knew from the lease. It was a different last name entirely. I mentioned it to him when he got home. He picked it up without looking at me and said it was an old account, wrong name on file, and he'd sort it out. It was a reasonable explanation. I accepted it, but I started paying attention to his mail after that, not opening it, just looking at the names on the envelopes as they came in. Over the next 3 weeks, I counted 4 different last names on mail addressed to him. Same first name, 4 different last names. One evening while he was out, I typed his full name, the one on our lease, into Google. The results took a few seconds to load, and when they did, I sat there reading for a long time. There was a court record, a case from 2 years earlier, in a different state. The charges had been reduced, and he'd served no prison time. But the nature of the original charges, what he'd been accused of before the plea deal, was specific enough and serious enough that I put my phone face down on the desk and sat very still for a while. I want to be careful about how I describe what I found, because I'm not going to detail the specific charges. What I will say is that it involved another person being harmed, and that the reduction in charges had come through a plea agreement that a lot of people in the comments of the court record felt was insufficient. There were names attached to those comments, people who knew the case personally. I closed the browser and cleared my history and went to bed. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. What I kept coming back to was the 4 last names. Because a court record from 2 years earlier in a different state was one thing. People make mistakes. People change. But 4 different last names on his mail weren't a mistake. That was deliberate. That was someone who had decided their real name was a liability and had built alternatives around it. The question that kept me awake was what the liability was. I started being very careful about my behavior in the apartment. Not visibly different. I didn't want him to notice anything had changed. I kept our interactions exactly as they'd been. Normal conversation, normal routines, normal everything. I smiled when I was supposed to smile and complained about work when that was the natural thing to do, but in my head, I was counting days until my lease was up. What made it worse was that I wasn't anywhere near the end of the lease. I still had about 4 months left. About 4 weeks after I found the court record, I came home and saw a printed sheet of paper on the kitchen table. It was one of the court pages, not the whole case. Just one page, printed out and left face up beside an empty glass like it had been set there carefully. Ryan was in the living room with the TV on mute. I stood there looking at the paper for a second. Then I looked at him. He didn't pretend not to know what it was. He just said, "You should read the whole thing before you decide what kind of person someone is." That was the first time either of us acknowledged it. I didn't answer. He let the silence sit for a few seconds, then said, "The internet gets a lot wrong." Still calm, still reasonable. That was the part that worked. If he had sounded angry, I think I would have known what to do with it, but he sounded like someone correcting a misunderstanding. After that, the apartment changed. Not visibly, but he hardly spoke to me, and he didn't mention the record again. When he did speak, he was more calm, but seemed forced. A few days later, I came home from work and found him in the kitchen making coffee. He looked up and said, "You know, people get themselves into trouble when they go digging around in things that don't involve them." Then he asked if I wanted a cup. I looked at the coffee in the cup, and I was quiet for a moment. Then I said, "What do you mean by that statement?" He said, "Whatever you understand or think it means is what it means." Then he went into his room, and that was it. No raised voice, no direct accusation, nothing I could repeat to the police or the landlord without sounding ridiculous. But I understood it exactly the way he meant me to. After that, I stopped thinking in terms of making it to the end of the lease. I just needed to get out before he decided to be clearer. I found another apartment with about 6 weeks left and signed the paperwork without telling him. I gave notice on a Monday morning, told him I was moving closer to work, kept it brief and friendly. He said he was sorry to see me go. He said it like he meant it. That should have reassured me, but it didn't. For the next couple of days, he stayed exactly the same, calm and quiet, which only made the line in the kitchen feel more deliberate. He wasn't losing control. He was letting me know he didn't need to. On moving day, I had 3 friends with me. I did that on purpose. I wanted noise and witnesses. Ryan wasn't home when we started, so we moved fast. He came back while we were loading the second car. He looked around at the boxes and said, "Earlier than I expected." I said the new place had come together faster than I thought. He nodded once, stepped aside, and said, "That's probably for the best." Again, a perfectly normal sentence said in a way that wasn't normal at all. We were out in under 3 hours, and I left my key on the kitchen counter. 2 weeks after I moved out, I got a call from a detective, not about Ryan directly, about a complaint that had been filed against someone matching his description at an address 2 streets from our old apartment. The detective asked if I had any information about my former roommate, how long I'd lived with him, and if I'd noticed anything concerning. I told him about the court record, the last names, the prepaid phone, the printed page on the kitchen table, and about what he said in the kitchen. He listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he said that was very helpful. Then he thanked me and ended the call. I don't know what the complaint was about or what came of the investigation. I've looked, but I haven't found anything that connects clearly enough to be certain. What I know is that I lived with him for 4 months without ever being completely sure who he really was. By the time I left, I knew enough about his past to understand that what he said to me in the kitchen was a threat, whether he said it plainly or not, and I got out before he felt the need to be any clearer. If you're new to Unlit Room and you enjoyed these stories, there are more like them on this channel. You can keep going from here.